Hey everybody, welcome back to the Good Doctor's final coverage of the And Nothing Less podcast. As ever, I'm Dr. Erin.
Dr. Kristen.
We're up to episode 7, which is the last episode of this podcast, entitled Failure is Impossible. Oh, bless Susan B. Anthony and her adorable little white lady quote about failure is impossible. I'm sure all the ladies of color referenced in this podcast would have something to say to her about that.
Would have disagreed, yes.
Would have disagreed with the nature of America. So this is going to be a short one for us. Like this, obviously this episode had to happen, kind of a look at after suffrage, and what the 1920s into the 1920s looked like.
Yep.
Which I thought was really interesting. I didn't know that more than southern states had literacy tests, but they told me by the end of the 1920s, it was all the southern states and 12 more. So yeah, this is just their opportunity to say what they've been saying this whole time, which was the 19th Amendment did not guarantee women the right to vote. It removed the barrier for white educated women. And there were a lot of other barriers that we...
Yeah, I mean, it technically removed the barrier of sex for everybody.
For everybody, yeah.
But because states' rights and racism, there were still other barriers to the ballot box. And so there is a lot to celebrate in the 19th Amendment.
Yes.
Because then we could build on it. The issue is because of states' rights and racism, they didn't actually write the amendment to prevent other barriers. And that was intentional because, again, they were dealing with people who wanted to shrink suffrage. Mm-hmm. So sure, like we'll give you that, you'll take away the barrier to gender, and we'll give you that we might take away the barrier, we'll give enfranchisement to Black men. But then, oh, look, here is all these other things that we can make a human do before they've earned the right to vote. Because ostensibly literacy tests affected white people as well.
Yeah.
It definitely did, especially poor white women in the Midwest. We have a lot of stories about that.
Yeah.
So, it was...
And the same as poll taxes as well, right? So there's the economic part of this as well. And that's why it's really important that this podcast and that we as reviewers of it note, that it really, the 19th really at the time, because of all these other barriers, enfranchised white, educated, middle-class women.
Correct.
And so there's all those intersections that were disenfranchised going forward by lots of things, including issues of citizenship, literacy tests, poll taxes, race, and states' rights throughout the remaining really 4 decades until we get the Voting Rights Act of 1965. But even now, obviously, this is something we know contemporaneously. We struggle with enfranchisement, full enfranchisement. We struggle with voter suppression and redistricting and kicking people off polls and all of these
creative nightmares and
all of this stuff. Yeah. So, this episode was important to happen. Content-wise, we don't have a whole lot to say except we're going to look up Jeanette Rankin, and you'll be hearing about her whenever her birthday comes around. And I would like to have a cup of coffee with her descendants. But yeah, aside from that, the work is unfinished. Failure is totally possible. I would disagree with Susan B. Anthony on the language of that, but I would say that it is not it is something we have to keep working for.
I also really love to know that there was a point in history that if I would have lost my citizenship if I married my husband because he was not a U.S. citizen. So I was really excited about the patriarchy in that particular story.
Yeah, that was shocking for me. I should also shout out Zitkala Saw, who, the Indigenous woman who formed the National Council of American Indians, because they did touch on, again, they had talked about it in a previous episode, but they talked about the particular stickiness of suffrage for Indigenous peoples in America, and the relationship between citizenship and voting and identity and erasure and all of that. So I will probably be digging more into that as I make myself the Indigenous expert of the two of us. So you'll hear more about Zitkala Saw as well and other Indigenous humans that fought for sovereignty and representation, which is still something we see happening today.
The overall lesson of this podcast, but also the centenary of the 19th Amendment and any other centenaries that we kind of engage with, like Dr. Hinson's already alluded to, and is that we constantly have to be relearning what we didn't know or what we thought we knew. Because there is always narratives left out of the story. Whoever tells us the story is who controls the narrative, and there's always people left out. That's just life. And so we are now actually going to watch 2 movies over the next 2 weeks that we've seen before, but we haven't seen them since taking this particular journey.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to start with Iron-Jawed Angels, which I know I've seen. I don't think you have, actually.
I have not seen, no.
And then we're going to go to Suffragette, which was released in cinemas in 2013. And stars Carey Mulligan.
Yeah, it was around the centenary, I think.
And Carey Mulligan with an appearance by Meryl Streep. And we're gonna talk about what those movies look like to us now, since seeing this entire, because in my memory, both of them are exceptionally white. So I don't know if that's true, but that's my memory. So we'll see.
Yeah, and commemorative periods are a great time to do this reexamination. And one of the things we've been learning in the last few weeks with, if you saw any of our Hispanic Heritage Month coverage as well, is the way we have to reframe these historical narratives. And when you reframe what became America in terms of colonization instead of discovery, it changes the way you see the world and who you see as excluded and who you want to include in your relearning. And similarly, when you see the fight for suffrage for all humans in the United States within the framework of states' rights and racism, you start to relearn all of the things that you thought you knew or didn't know. So we're going to keep reframing things contextually and historically as we go onward throughout our work here on this YouTube channel. So buckle up, kids.
So we'll see you over the next little bit for some more movies and art about suffrage and about that. And then we'll be kind of talking about that until we hit The Crown, which is another view on suffrage in a certain way. And maybe, just maybe, they'll talk about Elizabeth in this season.
Well, I won't hold my breath.
Will not hold my breath. So we'll see you guys next time for Iron-Jawed Angels. Bye.
Yeah.